to me, there's no doubt in my mind that Jesus exists, the Bible's true, that these things happened, that God intervened in human history and did these things for our salvation. And I think the whole thing is Jesus, God, does not want anyone to perish. And so from God's point of view, he'll use whatever tool he can to reach people wherever they're at. And some people need the physical proof. They need the science, the archaeology, the history to show what happened, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, that's written in the Bible.
Andrew Jones, welcome to For All the Saints. Thank you for coming on with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I actually wanted to start off with maybe an atmospheric opening, which would be to read from Genesis 8, the first few verses, to give a bit of context. And God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. So there's obviously the very, very famous story, which you'll obviously be very familiar with, of Noah's Ark. And we hear there that it landed in the region of the mountain of Ararat. And that's obviously where you're working. Could you tell us a bit about the setting of that place and like the surrounding area to give us a better picture of that today?
Yeah, this is eastern Turkey. It's on the Iranian-Armenian border. In this area, it's very mountainous. You have a lot of volcanoes. You have the famous Mount Ararat and its lesser peak, Little Ararat. You have nearby other mountains that are volcanic, like Tindrik Mountain, which is in kind of the mountain range that the Drupanar boat formation's in. And to the south of there, near Lake Van, you have a number of other volcanic mountains, Supan, Nimrut. And so, this area of eastern Turkey, that's full of volcanic mountains.
So you're working on this incredible boat-shaped mound that possibly could be the final landing place of Noah's Ark. Talking about this area, is there any reason why the Ark would stop there? Like, have you found anything that may be significant about the region?
No, I guess the main thing is the Bible says that the Ark, and it doesn't say why, but it just says the Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. Now, if you look at that word Ararat, it actually comes from the name for an ancient kingdom that later ruled that area, the kingdom of Urartu. And so during the time of Moses, when he wrote Genesis, I believe Moses wrote Genesis, that this kingdom might have been a smaller area, but focused in on the north area where we're at, basically the northern extent of the kingdom. Its full extent was during the Iron Age. This was after the flood of Noah, obviously. And so during earlier times, it was started a small country, you want to call it, or kingdom, up in this area near Mount Ararat. We're just right across from Mount Ararat. And so the Bible doesn't say why it would have gone there versus Hawaii or Everest. It just says it landed in that area. And so that's where most people have looked. Of course, the kingdom does cover northern Iran into Armenia, and of course, eastern Turkey.
Right. So, talking about this boat-shaped mound, how could you describe the mound itself and how it came to be discovered in the first place?
Yeah. Well, so let's first talk about how it was discovered. It was discovered in 1959 on September 11th, 9/11, 1959. A Turkish cartographer working for the military, Captain Drupanar, his job at the time was to make maps for Eastern Turkey. And, Turkey being a NATO member, bordering the Soviet Union at the time, they wanted, everything laid out in a map and all the details. And so he would take the high altitude photographs that their aircraft would take, 50, 60,000 feet up, and then make maps. And on September 11th, he found this boat formation. About a week later, it hit the press about a possible Noahs Ark sighting being discovered. And then by October that year, they actually published the photographs in Hayat magazine in Turkey, and then in other newspapers around the world. Then by June of 1960, the following year, an American Christian team came out, hooked up with Captain Drapenar, and they investigated the site with the help of the Turkish military. Most of the members of that team decided that it was a freak of nature and came back disappointed. One person, actually a couple people on that expedition thought that they were too negative and that they still needed to do work on the site. But that's kind of how it hit the press. And then it was kind of quiet for a while, and then it did get the attention of some people in America at that time when September 5th edition of Life magazine came out in America, and they published photographs of the June expedition. And one of the people that saw that article was Ron Wyatt. And he was a young guy at the time, and he was interested in the site, but he could not at that time go investigate it himself. But by the late 70s, I think it was 77, he was able in that next decade to first do his first trip there. And he came with on his first trip, he came with his 2 teenage sons and kind of like a family expedition. And they got chased out of their hotel, kind of a scary experience. And he saw the boat the final day of that trip, and he knew he had to come back to investigate it. That started his work. And he was probably the key figure to really promote it in the Western press and get interviews and books and speaking engagements, is kind of saying, hey, this is probably Noah's Ark. And he started doing his own limited work. No one could excavate, but he was doing, he did chemical tests, he did all sorts of geophysical scans, until the Turks built a place, a visitor center at the site in 1988 and declared it a natural phenomena for a national park for the shape of Noah's Ark. And so that was 1988. Now, sadly, Ron passed away in 1999. But even after he had passed away, others have continued to work. I'm sure you'll have questions about that. But if you go and visit the site, it's open to tourists, so you can go today. Go to Doa by Zet. You can either join one of our tours or meet us there. We can show you around if I'm in the area. I've done that with many groups and individuals, or just go on your own. The guy at the village there in Uzigali, his name is Nuri. He usually has the visitor center open that we renovated recently and during the summer months. And so you can check out the site. When you get there, you'll notice that it's pretty distinct boat formation sitting in this little valley on the mountainside. So it's about, and I'm going to give you like the, I don't know what to call American measurement. So 515 feet, whatever that is in meters, long. And that matches the Royal Egyptian cubit of 300 cubits given in Genesis chapter 6 for the length. It is a boat formation, boat shape, and it's kind of halfway down the mountainside. So it's that 6,500 feet elevation. And on the border above it is Iran. So it's very close to the Iranian border, like a mile and a quarter or so from Iran. And you have to walk through a couple local fields of wheat, and you get down to that valley below from the visitor center. And at first it's very deceptive. It looks kind of small, but when you get on it, it's huge, and it's actually quite a chore to walk around it because it's at an angle on this mountainside, and you're high up elevation, so a little less oxygen. And so, anyways, it's great. If someone wants to come out, the best time of year is like I like springtime, all the wildflowers. But so you have May, April, May and June. But even July and August, which are hotter months, it's a great time to see the site. And then if you don't want any of the green grass around, you want to really see the formation pop up out of the dirt there. Come in the fall, when all the green grass turns to brown. And so, it's, anyways, those are some, kind of gives you an idea what the site is like. It's 138 feet in the middle, so it is wider than the biblical account. And so a couple possibilities on that. Some of the scans are showing that the sides have like ancient boats decaying in the soil. They've splayed out from the original. Others have said it's an average that Moses gave because it was a boat shape, and so he was given the average of the I think it's 50 cubits. That kind of gives you a brief idea of what it looks like in the setting. And there's no really trees around. There's some in the ravine, but it's mainly barren hillsides, and you can see the Kurds with their shepherd, and then the shepherds out there with the sheep. It's very beautiful.
I wonder. I actually have an image here, and I wonder if you could take us around some of the like core features.
Sure.
And maybe
that's one of my drone photos.
I only just figured out how to. Oh, is that one of yours?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's. So at the top end, that's the southern end. If you go about a mile uphill, that's the Iranian border. So the south end is higher. The lower end is the rounded end of this boat formation. Now in the middle of it, you'll see there's a rock, like a large boulders, kind of a lighter color there. It is sedimentary rock, but that's in the middle. We can talk about that later. But at the very, very top where it's pointed, there's a little indentation on the left side, kind of down on the left rim of the boat, you can say, and a little area on the right side, almost opposite. Those are the two areas where in 1960, they decided that they had to see what's under the soil, and they used some destructive techniques. They used dynamite, because they had the Turkish military with them, and they blew a couple holes in the side of the boat, trying to look for petrified wood. And when they didn't see anything that they recognized as wood, they kind of gave up. But those holes are still there, and the sides up there. Now, the formation basically has kept the same dimensions since it was first photographed in 1960. Now, there's a lot of erosion going on. You can see on especially the left side of that image, which is the eastern side. It's kind of jagged. But what happened that kind of caused a lot of like faster erosion was that this whole formation, which was basically level with the ground, in 1959 and 60, it became more exposed, the sides, when a 1970s earthquake hit the region and dropped the soil away. And so that kind of made the boat object pop out of the ground more and more exposed, and so you have this erosion. Of course, also, sadly, we have sheep going through with the locals. They sometimes try to keep the shepherds away, but they walk around and they're grazing, and so it kind of has it has kind of ruined the sides of, especially that top right side. Used to be a very straight edge. You can see in the older photographs that because of many sheep, but it's just, tourists do walk down there too. But yeah, so that's kind of this is what we believe to be the buried remains of Noah's Ark. Now, the one thing I want to point out also is that the middle, that's the 138-foot widest point right below the rock formation there. And that's the area where it looks like it has decayed and fallen away. And so it's probably wider than the original boat. And the other thing, just to get ahead here, if someone says, well, that rock, you'll see some criticism on the internet, obviously, and on YouTube videos where they say this is a natural formation that was caused by a rock, mainly that rock in the middle. And then so as the mud is flowing downhill, they claim that it created this, almond shape or boat shape. The biggest problem with that is when a rock is in a mud flow or a stream, and the liquid is going around it, like mud in this case, it would form an object the opposite of what this is, meaning that the pointed end, because of fluid dynamics, would be downhill, and gravity would be forming a point, and the material building up around the rock, the obstruction in the mud flow, which in this case would be, they're claiming is this boulder, that would form a rounded end at the uphill end of the boat. As you can see here, the pointed end is opposite. It's uphill. The bulbous shape, rounded end, is downhill. And so you can't say that rock created this. But anyways, we can go through some of the scan results and some of the other criticism, whatever questions you have. But that kind of gives you an idea of the site there.
Yeah, thank you. That was so interesting. I'm interested. You were mentioning scans and things like this, and I bet it's really complex. But wondering if you could explain, like, what is the actual research that happens to actually verify this hypothesis that it is the remains of Noah's Ark?
Well, if you look at, some people want to claim Ron just made up stuff or had a vivid imagination. But the thing is, when it was first discovered in 1960, they were scanning that whole area with photographs trying to make these maps. And there's only one site that jumped out at them. There's not multiple of these all over there, like some people claim. There's only one boat formation that just happens to be the length of Noah's Ark. So if you're going to say this is Noah's Ark, number one, it needs to match the biblical dimensions. It can't be 1,000 feet long or, 1,000 feet wide. It can't be a triangle shape, So the first step is that got people interested was, number one, it was a boat formation. And number two, it has a dimension that fit the biblical account. And number three, we're in the mountains of Ararat. So we're in the general area, the mountainous area of this ancient kingdom where Moses said Noah's Ark landed. So now that should get people interested in checking the site out further. So beyond that, though, Ron was the one who first started doing scans. This is like non-destructive techniques that can let you peer below the soil. And so the first thing they did was metal detectors, like traditional beachcomb metal detectors they used to find coins and treasures. So he got the idea that maybe there is metal in Noah's Ark. Now, the Bible doesn't mention that the boat that Noah used metal. The Bible's very general in terms of how, like, we don't know the techniques or anything. It just says it had 3 floors, 1 door, 1 window, and also that it was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. So I think I got that right. But anyways, it's very general. It doesn't say much about the shape or how thick the hull was, or were these the internal dimensions, like the capacity of the boat, or was this the external measurement from outside to outside, or from floor to ceiling? How thick were the floor beams? How many animals got in there? Moses had to write all that down. So Ron thought, well, let's check with metal detectors. And sure enough, he got a pattern of metal just in the boat formation. And, he was also walking out in the earth flow, the mud flow around it. And this random noise out there. But in the boat formation, they were getting readings in some places every 9 feet, like on the western very ridge of that boat. And so because of that, they brought in other technologies that were kind of new at the time. That included ground penetrating radar that can actually see structure below the soil, and up to a certain depth. And so they employed that, and other teams did the same thing. Like Dr. Sally Brock-Tuton was John Baumgartner. Dr. Baumgartner is a creation scientist. He's still around, and Sally is still alive too. And we have worked with Sally recently to do further studies and just to understand his past research on the site. And he's a retired Turkish geologist that believes that this is the best candidate for Noah's Ark. It's not a geological formation. So he studied this the most since the mid-80s, 1984, 85 until now. And so not only has metal detectors been used and GPR, ground penetrating radar, but recently we've had ERT, which uses electricity. So 2014 was the first time that ERT was used. And so this uses the electrical current to map out the resistive nature, what's below the ground. And then the computer and the software can create a 3D model of what is below there. So geologists use it, archaeologists use it. And then in 2021, the Turkish government repeated what John Larson did, but on a bigger scale with longer cables, more scans. John, I believe, did 13 scans. The Turkish scientists did 39 scans. John was focused mainly inside the boat formation, with some of the cables going out of the formation. The Turks, because they had a longer cable, and also, I don't know if they had more time or whatever, but they also scanned way out into the mud flow. They wanted to see how this object sat and its environment there. What's its connection to the mud flow? Was it unique or just part of it? So these non-destructive techniques have given us the ability to peer below the soil without doing any excavations yet, and give us possible patterns of below the ground that suggest a man-made object. So that includes things like the actual floors, like how many decks there were, how thick the deposits are below the ground. Is it unique compared to what's outside the boat formation, or just a jumble of rocks? Where is the bedrock there? Isn't this formation of just bedrock popping up right here? Or are we seeing cavities in the possible rooms? So we're seeing right angles, we're seeing parallel lines, and most recently, we had so for example, in 2019, we brought in an American team, and we did this with the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery Channel. They filmed our effort, and we did GPR work for about a week. And the GPR work was analyzed by an American archaeologist who trains archaeologists on GPR. He has his own school in America and classes and YouTube channel. So he came up with some initial results showing some right angles. We then took that raw data, and just like 2 months ago, we turned it all over to another geophysicist. This lady has 40 years experience. I think she's originally from Eastern Europe, but now she works in America. And she has her own company there, consultant firm that people hire for geological exploration, archaeology. She analyzed everything, and she was able to find a tunnel. And basically, who knows what it is, a hallway, you can say, that's on that top end of the boat going down in the middle, that's not full of water or mud, that's partially preserved. We haven't released the images yet. We're still working on it, but we're also seeing part of a parallel one, like it had another side hallway to the left of that, on that top end of the boat. And on top of it, not only are we seeing this tunnel, it leads to an open area, a void that's in the middle of the boat. And just speculating here, but if you go to like the Ark Encounter by Entrance to Genesis in Kentucky, and their 500-foot wooden model boat they have there for Noah's Ark, they have this open like atrium or area where light and fresh air comes down through all the decks. And so it's interesting, you have this big kind of like a hole in the middle that this tunnel or hallway on the possible second deck of the boat goes to. And on top of it, this new radar analysis is showing the possible layout of these rooms or cages or whatever you want to call them, where we're seeing multiple lines going down across and others going this way, very faint ones on this reanalysis of our data. So we'll put out, she's still working on it, and we hope to get some information out in the video about it. Obviously, all this stuff needs to be ground truth. And so that's why they use this tool, archaeologists and geologists, but you still need to do either core drilling to get samples out or an excavation. And now, sadly, no one's done that, mainly because the Turkish government has never allowed anyone to actually dig a hole there. Now, one thing they've told us is that they're afraid that what if you dig, you don't find Noah's Ark, and then they won't make any tourist dollars. They're thinking of the dollars and the politicians. I'm just going where the data goes, what the evidence shows. But and then the other thing is they don't want archaeology is a destructive science. You can't put back what you take away. So if you dig a big traditional square hole, you'll ruin the boat's shape and the thing that people go to take photos of. So one idea someone threw out was, maybe they could do a side tunnel from the eastern side away from the visitor center. You wouldn't see this. Now that is a non-traditional way in archaeology. They don't really tunnel. They usually want to see the stratigraphy and the one that goes top down. But they at least could do core drilling, the 3-inch holes they can drill down and get samples or whatever the radar is showing. We're hoping they get to that stage. Right now, none of that has been done yet. They've just started this year, the Turkish universities, doing walking surveys, which is just looking at the surface, collecting samples of pottery and whatever they see on the surface, rocks and soil, and then things like that. That's what hit the news, actually, is that just that initial survey, some of the results from that. But in regards to your question about how would you prove it's Noah's Ark, I think excavations will ultimately prove it. Right now, it's very, to me, it's the best candidate because it's the shape of a boat. It's the dimensions given in the Bible. It's in the location the Bible says it would be. And the geophysical scans are suggesting man-made patterns below the surface that are not natural. And so just from that, I think people should focus in on doing further investigation. And thankfully, the Turks are.
Right. That's so interesting. It's so fascinating. I love hearing about sort of the world of archaeology and excavation and all of that. Maybe in another life, I would have done that myself.
I'm not even an archaeologist. I took classes in college, but my parents told me, don't go into archaeology. You're not going to make any money. Make that your serious side hobby. They said, go and do something else and it will support your hobby. So I went into computer science. Was a programmer for many years. Now I do tours and this research. But so I love archaeology. Loved it since I was a kid. And there's a book out by I think Sarah Peck. I think that's her name. She talks about no, I don't know if that's what it's Peck. But anyways, she's an archaeologist, but in her book, she's talking about space archaeology. We're using remote sensing from satellites. She even claimed in the book that in the future, maybe we'll get to the point where we have technology, like we see what they're using at the pyramids to see possible voids and chambers, where you can do the sensing technology and maybe not even excavate an object. You can peer right through it like an X-ray, see what below the soil and through the walls. And so that's this is where the technology is going, and so it's possible maybe they only have to excavate Noahs Ark in the future. So who knows?
This is a slight tangent, but because you brought it up, there are so many conspiracy theories going around about what is actually under the pyramids, and did in these ancient times they have more technology than what we think they had and stuff. What do you think to that? Do you think there's a huge, giant
obelisk?
Monument obelisk? That's the one I've
saw
seen.
That. No, sadly, no. No, I don't believe it that there is a Noah's Ark is obviously thinking outside the box for normal archaeology. So I'm not inside the box up and figure out on archaeology. I believe the Bible is true, but in regards to the pyramids, it's built on a limestone platform. Limestone is sedimentary rock. I believe in the global flood, so I believe that these were post-flood monuments. The stones themselves, sadly, someone tried to say they're cement or man-made that way, but you can see fossils in the stones and on the platform on this plateau. It's built in Giza. It's a post-flood monument. There are some inscriptions in them. I guess the more interesting thing for me is what was the real purpose of the Great Pyramid? Or was it more than just a tomb? No bodies were found. Is there another chamber there that's the tomb? What are these unopened chambers that are showing up in the scans? There's so much more to be learned about this, but I do not think aliens built it or that they're pre-flood monuments. And so this is my opinion. So you might get a whole bunch of links from viewers saying, "Oh, check out this video, check out that video."
Yeah, anyway, I know. Just to avoid the disappointment of many of my conspiracy theorist friends, I may have to cut it out to appease it. No, I won't.
Yes.
Well, in fact, what do you think of? What do you think of Graham Hancock? He did that really interesting series, Ancient Apocalypse.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of the episodes. I know my archaeologist friends, the professional archaeologists, were like, "Oh, it's a bunch of trash." They were kind of upset that Netflix, I think it was on Netflix, right? That they were promoting it, or they made it. I'm again open to other theories because I don't think we've figured out everything about the ancient world, obviously, and we're always learning something new. But I'm also of the opinion that there are no aliens that came down and started civilization here or helped anyway. In regards to the dates, so I'm a young Earth creationist, so I wouldn't put all these things. I know they say, "Oh, this is 10,000, and this was during the Neolithic," and they put it way past what I would consider for a creationist. But doesn't mean that after the flood, people lost all their knowledge. I think people still had the knowledge of they lived longer. If you believe the biblical account, you have people living almost 1,000 years. Noah 950 years. Adam, what was it? Methuselah 969. I think he's the longest person they say. You have these long ages. Even some of the other accounts outside of the Bible, you have people living long ages. And so what are you going to do with your time if you're living that long? For the amount of time we live, think of the geniuses of the world today, or during the Renaissance, they lived 50, 60, 70, maybe 100 years, and they can do so much. Bill Gates, Elon Musk. But then if you Da Vinci. But then if you look at someone who had a a longer lifespan and probably closer to creation. So they probably were healthier and bigger brains, or like more creative, like God originally made Adam. Who knows what they came up with, what they could have done. And so even after the flood, I think some of that knowledge, it wasn't all lost. Now the Bible account talks about an event called the Tower of Babel, and this event is what created all the languages, and people got scattered around the world. So I think a lot of things were lost, and people that speak the same language, and everyone had to migrate to different parts of the world. Maybe some people didn't know how to make certain things. That group only spoke one language, but they didn't know how to make whatever. And that was another group who knew how to make whatever, like iron alloys or whatever. So, again, there's a lot we don't know what happened. And the Bible's very brief. And to me, archaeologists who don't believe in the Bible, they're going to come up with wild theories, or make it span long ages. And so, we'll see, because they're always finding something new. So who knows what we'll find.
Yeah, but I always had a thought that maybe when it talks about Methuselah and all of the genealogy and how surprisingly old they all lived, I always wondered if that actually meant their direct line of ancestry. Like Methuselah lived to 900 and whatever it was, but maybe that meant like his direct posterity, and then someone maybe had a daughter or something, and it changed the next. Like I don't know, but that was one of my theories.
Hard to say, because the Bible does have it gives a date when he started, like when he had his firstborn, and it seems pretty old. I mean, I don't know what the dates are off the top of my head, but it seems like that was his life. And then he lived a certain amount of years. Then he had when his son was, and then he lived more and had more. Since he had other sons and daughters. To me, I'm willing to accept that they lived a long time, and that that these people had closer to creation before sin entered. They were supposed to live forever, Adam and Eve. Because of sin, there's death. So I don't know. I guess we'll figure out a lot of things later. But for now, I do accept what the Bible wrote on that.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to Noah's Ark after my pyramid tangent. What about the so we've talked about the sort of signs and evidences of the man-made structure being within the mound of the boat. Mm-hmm. Are there other signs of life around there? Signs that maybe humans were there?
Yeah. So what was most interesting? So the Turks, Agri University in İTÜ, which is Istanbul Technical University, they started their scientific work on the site last December. And they announced the initial, this is like the bare minimum, the initial results of their initial survey. And so they had a Noahs Ark symposium, a Mount Ararat Noahs Ark symposium at Agri University there in Eastern Turkey. And it's the main government university. They hold a symposium, this conference, every 2 years. And so at the conference, the rector of İTÜ, the Istanbul Technical University, gave like a 7-minute announcement to the audience. I think it's on their YouTube channel, but it's all in Turkish. And I had it translated. But anyways, it basically talked about what they had initially discovered, and that they have to do a lot more work, but there was positive results that they want to continue, and that they will be announcing their next year's plan soon. And so it wasn't negative what they had found. So what was most interesting that they talked about was that in that area, not necessarily on the boat formation itself, which is covered in mud and dirt, but in that area above it, around it, they found pottery pieces, which he was saying the announcement dates back to the Chalcolithic or Copper Age, and that it was like the earliest that pottery would have been started, to be used in that region of Eastern Anatolia. So here you have, we go way back in time. I don't necessarily agree with the dates, but let's just say right after the flood, people who were still in that area, Noah and his families or whoever, they started making pottery there and using pottery. And so they were very excited about that. So that's kind of like, you could say, for archaeological point, interest, you want to find, cultural remains, not just rocks. So finding pottery in the area got them really interested and showed how old civilization was in that area. The other thing that's interesting, this was not done by them, but others. I don't know if they went to this area, but right above the boat formation is this rock ridge. This is an escarpment of limestone rock that you've seen a lot of the photographs way up there. At the base of that, on the northern edge of that, they have found in the past an ancient settlement. And so this was in 2000, I believe. There was another group that went up there, and it was just doing, again, a walking survey. So I don't know if this recent one, they hit up the same area. That's where they got their pottery from, or they're talking about other areas around the boat formation. But at any rate, multiple people who have investigated the sites have found pottery and remains of houses up there above the ark. And so, and for sure, that it's showing that it's just not a barren area. That definitely civilization going way back to the start of the pottery age, to right after the flood, that this was inhabited.
Right. And I'm interested, what do you say when people ask you, as I'm sure they do, about the animals, the logistics of the animals? How literal? I know you said before that you take the Bible's wording on it, and sometimes the Bible is very brief. But how literal do you take the story of Noah's Ark with regards to the animals?
Yeah. So, again, as you mentioned, and we were talking earlier about the Bible not giving all the details. Studies have been done about how many animals. I think it was even in a peer-reviewed article about could Noah's Ark float. This is I think in physics journal, and I use it in my talk. But basically, the students, I don't know if they were believers in the Bible, but they were trying to show that animals the size of sheep, I think they're saying a couple million could be in the maybe a couple 100,000 variety. Like if you had the size of a sheep as the average size. There's a lot of questions. We don't know how old the animals were. Were they just small ones that fit them in there? Were they all adults and huge animals? Then you have less animals to fit in the boat. And today, here's another example of for the variety of animals. I watched this film on a documentary film on Netflix about dogs, and it was showing how all the species, or I should say, the varieties or breeds we have today. 200-300 years ago, they didn't have that many, and it was all bred because it's different. Everyone had a look they wanted for a certain breed, and so that now we have all these weirdly shaped and sizes of dogs. But 200-300 years ago, we didn't. So I don't know when the Bible talks about the different kinds of animals that went on the ark, what all that covered, and what after the flood, how many of those could survive. And again, the ark did not hold the fish. It mentions birds of the air and the creepy crawly things, and the and mammals, basically, those that walk on the land, and humans. But regards to everything else, it was outside the boat. Now, it does say everything was destroyed. All life was destroyed. So we have to assume that what was on the boat, that kind of restart civilization with what was there. So it's difficult. There are things where I'm just willing to accept by faith that it happened. I don't know the exact logistics of, and for me, I love trying to figure things out. It's like a puzzle. And so maybe if the site's ever excavated and we can see the layout of everything, that'll give us an idea of how many animals were brought on, and what that can mean for what the Bible says. Right now, it's speculation, but the Bible for sure does say that those that went on the ark survived, and everything else outside that was not fish or whatever died. So.
Right. And speaking of your faith, you take faith on a lot of these things, as I would. What I'm interested in, your interest in Noah's Ark, and what got you to coming here and dedicating your career and livelihood to studying.
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up in a Christian home, so you always hear the stories. We had family worship, we read the Bible, but I was also interested in archaeology, the things outside of the Bible, and Roman history, and even the Wild West, American history, whatever. But early on, I remember I was a kid, I made a paper mache Noah's Ark. I was always interested in that story. It's the first big story in the Bible, basically. You have this big flood, and then everything's destroyed. But what really got me interested was when I heard about Ron Wyatt. He wasn't a professional archaeologist, just someone just like us who's interested outside of their professional career in archaeology. But he went out there and put his life on the line and did all this extra research and started investigating these sites. And so because of his research, that's what got me interested. Not to defend what he said or believe everything he wrote, like he was a prophet, but that he was used by God to finding stuff, but at the same time, not infallible. And so for me, it wasn't trying to prove somebody right or prove this or that. It was more of a just like inquisitive nature. So in '97 was my first trip out to Turkey. I was in college, and I had to go see it. And a friend was going. He needed a travel companion, so he contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to go with me?" I was like, "Yes." And so during college, I went out there for a week in June 1997, and I saw the site. We didn't do anything. We were just like tourists taking pictures and walking around and meeting. I met my friends up there who helps a lot with our work these days. And so he was our guide, our translator and everything during that trip, still is. And so anyways, this really cemented in my mind that this needs to be promoted and researched more, because in '97, Ron was still alive, but 2 years later, he passed away. Then in 2000, I had a chance to go back twice. And this is when I first met Dr. Salih Barak Tutan. Here's a professional geologist who lives in the area, nearby, about 5 hours away, and who studied the site all these years. And he believed it was Noah's Ark. And so here was someone who's a professional and was saying this is not a geological formation. He's a geologist. So that was interesting. And then I kind of got away from this whole thing on Noah's Ark until 2013 when I came back and reconnected with Zafer, and then started going almost every year to the boat site. And then people wanted to see it, so then started tours out there. But our goal was merely to get the Turks or other scientists to get more interest in the site. And so my faith that this was the best possible candidate in the biblical account for Noah's Ark, that I started, putting all the time, energy, and money trying to get others interested in it who have the education or the science behind it that they could do more work. So that's why it was exciting to have a GPR team in 2019 to scan the site with 2 different antennas with the science channel there. And then in 2021 to be there as an observer and document the Turkish scientists doing their work with the ERT. And I was also there as an observer when John Larson did his scans with ERT in 2014. And so the last 3 major complete scans of the site, I was there involved in some way or another. And so my faith in the story, it's kind of the driving thing. Obviously, if I was not a believer, I would not go find Noah's Ark or even worry about this boat formation. But because I do believe in the Bible, and I see this as a great site to show people how the Bible is true, I'm interested in showing that, discovering if it really is Noah's Ark. And for me, it's the best candidate. So, more work has to be done. And so I'm just out there, doing the grind every day, trying to get things done out there, and either with the visitor center or bringing the people out there to check it out or helping, the scientists.
How has spending so much time around iconic biblical sites such as Mount Sinai and this one that you're at and others that you do tours to, how has that impacted and strengthened your faith in Jesus Christ?
Yeah, so I am a believer. I'm a Christian, and I do. I can say that there are days when you're like, because there'll be problems. Everyone has problems in life. There'll be days you have your ups and downs. But I can say that I with seeing the evidence, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that Jesus exists. The Bible's true. That these things happen. That God intervened in human history and did these things for our salvation. It's whether you have a bad day or a good day, it doesn't change the facts. And for me, these facts help show it's like a foundation to your faith that, hey, the Red Sea crossing existed, Mount Sinai existed, Jesus walked the earth, Noah's Ark happened, the remains are still there. And so it does help. I was never a doubting Thomas, like, oh, I need to see the physical proof. I always had some amount of faith in the stories. But it's always nice to see extra proof and then to be able to share it with people who need that. And a good example would be someone like where you have Doubting Thomas, who he was a disciple of Jesus, but after the resurrection, he needed the physical proof that Jesus resurrected. So he wanted to see the nail prints, the spear wound in the side of Christ. And so that he needed to see that. And so, while Jesus talks about blessed are those who do not see and still believe, he still showed this proof to Thomas. And I think the whole thing is Jesus, God does not want anyone to perish. And so from God's point of view, he'll use whatever tool he can to reach people wherever they're at. And some people need the physical proof. They need the science, the archaeology, the history to show what happened, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, that's written in the Bible. So that is true. Others, they don't. They have a dream, or they're saved, like, Paul on the road to Damascus. He sees a vision and he's saved. So he doesn't need the physical proof. But so for me, it has helped. But I've never doubted that God existed. But to me, it's more of a tool I can use for others. But all those bad days, those rainy days when you're depressed or whatever, and things are going bad, and being able to be at these sites and realize, wow, all the miracles that have happened in this research, or just being able to think of the stories of you brought someone out to the site and it changed their life, and thinking what God has done through the tours or through the YouTube videos, and people see it, and that, it lifts your spirit and helps you get through the day.
And when you think too that there are even many Christians today who consider these ancient stories more myths and legends and cautionary tales,
allegories, right? You do have whole denominations that will say, well, they believe in evolution and that creation never happened, or the flood was an allegorical story, and why try to look for something that's a myth? So it is sad, but hopefully that's why God has left evidence around for each one of those big events in the Bible. And even the small things, like you look at biblical archaeology, they're always finding something in Israel and Jordan or Egypt that helps us understand the Bible, help enlighten, illuminate the text of the scriptures, and also prove like that an individual existed or an event happened. And so for me, if you go to other parts of the world where they don't have any foundation or belief in Jesus or anything with the Bible, these are very important. The physical proof to show that the stories that were from that area of the world and written in the Bible are true and not just myths.
Well, that's interesting. So what do you think are the repercussions of if you can get substantial, like, verifiable, this is Noah's Ark? What do you think the repercussions are on the world for that?
Well, it's interesting. Everyone, the goal is not, it would be nice if everyone was convinced and everyone's saved. Obviously, according to the Bible, that won't happen. But you'll always have people who will doubt. So if you look at the story of Jesus here on earth, the Pharisees were always trying to kill him, that these religious leaders, and they wouldn't believe. No matter what Jesus did, they wouldn't believe. And Jesus even said, if someone was raised from the dead, you wouldn't believe in him being the Messiah. And sure enough, he raises Lazarus from the dead, and they try to kill Lazarus. It's like, okay, the guy who's just raised from the dead, you want to kill him again? So I think that, that's the most powerful thing you can see, a dead person come back to life. So today, you will, just if you can prove that there's Noah's Ark, it doesn't mean that you'll get the whole world to be believing in the truth. But there are those who need it. And so you can't just write it off. I've seen some groups, they're creationists, they'll say, oh, we don't need Noah's Ark. We have the Gospels, which is true. That's great. But you don't know where someone's at in their life, what their background is, where they might need the science, the history, the archaeology to show that the Bible is true. And I don't see where God is limiting himself. I don't want to put God in a box. So I do believe he can use these tools to reach out to people. So
Mm-hmm. Um, so I just want to sort of round off with like what some of the common arguments against it are, and what are some of the skeptical arguments
Yeah.
that you've come up across and have had to defend against and figure out.
So for the Noahs Ark, right?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the first you can say criticism about the site. They'll say obviously if they don't believe it's Noah's Ark, then they have to have a reason of why there's a boat shape there. And so for that they'll say, well, the shape was formed obviously a natural process. They'll claim. And so what is that process? Well, there's a couple ones they'll use. One that's really popular is that, as we talked about earlier, is that it's a rock. That there's a rock in the mud flow, an obstruction. So as the mud flows around it, it forms this boat shape. As I mentioned earlier, the rebuttal to that is that, well, this is the opposite of what the shape that would be formed. The pointed end is uphill, the rounded end is downhill. The scans are not showing a big rock there with the mud building around it. In fact, the scans don't even show that there's underneath like the boat formation is all just jumble and random rocks. We have these patterns showing up that's not outside in the mud flow around it. So it is unique. The other thing they'll say, well, this was a solid slab of rock that came down from higher up. That was actually published in a peer-reviewed journal. This Turkish geologist said, yeah, this was a limestone rock that came down from above, from the higher up in the mountainside. And then over time, glaciers and natural processes shaped it into what we see today. The strange thing is, I should say, the thing about that and the rebuttal to that is we're not seeing a solid rock below the ground. Like the whole formation, it's not like you can drill down and suddenly, oh, if you touch it, it's just a rock. So what the scans are showing is that, no, this guy's article, the whole point he was trying to make is false, that this is not a solid block of rock that was then shaped over time, thousands of years or whatever, millions of years. It is showing that there are layers of possible rock. Petrified wood is rock, for example. That there are angles down there. There are right angles. There are parallel lines. These reflections are suggesting that there's more to it down there. There's obviously mud has filled in the crevices and the voids. Except now this new scan results that we're seeing by this lady, she is showing that below the ground is right down the center line of the boat, from the pointed end to the middle, is a hallway, you could say, this tunnel. And so there's possible more down there than we realize. So again, those are the two big things, how they say the shape got there. A couple people have tried to find other, like nearby or around the world, other shapes that look like a bulbous shape or an almond shape, and say, hey, look, this is this is exactly what they found here. So it has to be natural. So again, you go back to 1960, and when they were, or 59, when they were scanning this area and making their maps, only one object popped out in their surveys. And only one was the focus. There was not multiple boat shapes all over. And when someone today tries to show you a shape, you got to look at it and see, where is it at? What's the size? Isn't even the length and width of Noah's Ark. What is the history of whatever they're trying to, like the site history? Is it in a stream bed? Does it match exactly what this is? So I think I have not seen one example, for example, a site that you could use and say, hey, this is exactly like the Drupanar boat formation, thus Drupanar's faults. Let's see, some of the outliner criticism views. Someone said this was a Mongolian fort. I don't think anyone says that anymore because you have like a boat-shaped fort and it's in the valley. Like the attackers could be up on the hills shooting down at it. It's the worst location for a fort. One guy wrote that he said, this was a replica built by Constantine the Great. Again, show the proof of that. I mean, you can't just pull out these theories out of the ground and say, hey, like, okay, so you're saying it's a boat formation, but now you're saying it's a replica built, in the Christian era. So, yeah, you do have all these theories like that are kind of crazy that we don't even focus in on. But yeah, so those are the main criticism. Now, let's see. There's another one I'm trying to remember. Oh, they say it's a syncline. Um, these geological formations that are formed, mainly on a wider scale. And I talked to Sally about some of this, and he was like, "Look, if you look at the region here and how these layers are from the Iranian border coming down into Turkey, and the way the ground and the rocks are folding, this is not a syncline. People who write stuff like this, they either have not been at the site or have not studied it like the amount of time he has. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Those are some of the big ones. That it's a syncline or um, that it's a rock obstruction. The one like you'll see in some of the creation. Yeah, sadly, there are creationists who will attack it. Everyone has their pet idea where Noah's Ark is, but like Answers in Genesis, they made a couple of recent videos. And they were saying things like, well, their favorite one is that it's a rock obstruction, and the mud flowed around the rock and created it. So that's the one that everyone kind of jumps on and uses all the time. But yeah.
And what's next for the site? What's your plans for 2024, or when might there be signs of coming excavation and all of that? What's the future?
Well, for us, we have some videos we're making. Now, so in regards to the research side, on our end, we are trying to finalize or finish up this reanalysis of our data. All this GPR data that we collected back in 2019. That's one thing, because we were getting some really, as I mentioned, some really interesting results from the reanalysis. We'd like to put that out there for others to look at. The other thing is we're trying to still get access to the 2021 Turkish scientist data. We'd like to get a hold of that and analyze it ourselves. Now, they have not even put out the results of their data. We saw the initial results a couple months after their survey in 2021. So I think it was February of 22. My friend and I went to the office of the scientist who did the work, and he gave us a private preview of some of the things, and he was saying that there's something unique below the ground just within the boat formation that's not just random rocks and mud compared to what's outside. He showed us some images, but again, we could not record because he had not published anything, and the data is owned by the Turkish governor's office there. But we have talked to the Turks throughout this year, and they have said we will have access to that. I don't know what format. I'm praying that it's the original raw digital data that we could then have others reanalyze it. So we're working hard on that. Or if they can just give us like a summary report of what they found, that'd be cool too, because this is like the most recent complete scan of the site using ERT. So it'd be nice to see that. So that's another thing we're working on. Now there are a couple things where Dr. Sully, we're helping sponsor his work. He's still doing, some things in the area. One thing he's really trying to figure out, when you're at the site, you'll notice that the mud around it, and the natural mud flow, the earth flow, the soil there is less compact, and it's crumbly. It's like normal dirt, but the boat formation is being held in place, even with the erosion. It's still kept its same length, width, and it's harder material. So something is, and he told me this, and I even talked about to others, where there's something in the dirt there that is just holding it together. And so maybe, again, speculating here, but maybe the decayed process of this giant boat had the pitch that kept it waterproof, and whatever type of wood they used and other material as it decayed has affected the soil there. And thus we have this boat shape. So this is something he's collected soil samples, and we're helping sponsor some of that. And there's also some rock studies he's doing for the area, and he would like to publish scientific peer-reviewed articles about the results of his research. So we're helping him on that. We're also working slowly on a book that we could have at the visitor center that explains all this in layman's terms to the tourists. Because people show up, there's not really much there for them besides taking a picture. In our posters, we do have a little video they can watch, but something to take home with them. We would like to have that. So I don't know if it'll be published next year, but we're working on something like that. Regards to excavations, so the Turks announced that they're basically investigating the site, and they started last year, as I mentioned. There were definitely next year they would not be excavating. Their initial work that they would like to do, if you look at like an archaeological site, they've done the walking survey. They like walked the ground, looked at what's around. They found the pottery. They took soil and rock samples. After that, they would like to hopefully do some core drilling. But even before they get to that, they want to do their own scans. And so here we're looking at the scans being done. So like we're always starting with the scans, and we never get past doing more geophysical scans. But they said that, I guess as scientists, they want their own data, that they say we scanned and did it. And they're claiming that the 2021 scans, the people I talked to who are involved in the new project, they said, well, we believe that we can do a better job or more complete scans with other techniques than what they did in 2021, what the other Turkish scientists did. And so, okay, so that I don't know if they will, when they'll start that, but I think that's their next step, that they're going to do scans this next summer of their own. And I don't know if it's going to be GPR. We talked to the lady who was doing our analysis of our GPR, and she suggested doing microgravity survey, which she said would be a really good thing there that could show what's below the ground. So we passed it on to the Turks. I'm sure they've looked at it already, but anyways, so I don't know all the details of what they're doing, but they did invite us to be part of their project. And, I'm not a professional archaeologist, so it was nice to have them extend that, as whether we were just observing or helping or just taking pictures, I don't know. But at any rate, we will be a part of their project, so we can, as they allow us, we can release information. But yeah, so that's kind of where things are at. And of course, we have some in regards to like the tours and show people the sites. We are doing some new tours where we call it the Patriarchs Tour, where it will go not just to Noahs Ark in this region that we are to, we're also going to take them, like the patriarchs, from Noah's Ark to Abraham. And so there is this northern Mesopotamia theory, and in fact, the Muslims do claim that Abraham's birth cave is in Şanlıurfa, in southern Turkey, right near Göbekli Tepe and some of these ancient sites. And so and then of course you have Haran, which is non-disputed to be there in southern Turkey. Jacob's well is there. And so anyways, these sites that are associated with the first chapters of the first half of Genesis, we'd like to do this. And so we're going to do a new type of tour that'll take people from the Noah's Ark region all the way to southeast southern Turkey. So that's kind of covering our what we're doing in Turkey, how our plans are for next year, besides our online efforts and making more videos and such.
And this is all brilliant, and the tours sound so cool. Like I've been reading up on all of them, and very much
you have a short flight you can
them.
take. Yeah, just show up. We'll show you around, and you don't have to go through the registration of a tour. Just let me know if you're in the area, and I can show you the sites, and you can make a video for your podcast.
Oh yeah, and if people want to support the project, follow you, find out more, keep up to date, where should they go?
We have a website with they can sign up for our email newsletter, which we don't get out as often as I'd like, but we have one coming up for the end of the year summary. But go to nuh'un.com, and that has links to on the menu. You go to the tour website via the menu there, which takes you to East Turkey Expeditions, which is our tour in that area of Turkey. But then the nuh'un.com under contact us, I think it is, there's a place you can sign up for the newsletter, and also links to our social media like Instagram and YouTube. And so you can see we post a lot on our Instagram and YouTube, like shorts and stories and things like that. So we do have a Facebook group if people are still using Facebook. And so they can go to Discovered Media. That's in Facebook, they can search for Discovered Media. In fact, the YouTube channel is called Discovered Media too. But these are all linked in the footer of the website. So go to nuh'unsarkscans.com and take you to wherever you need to go.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And if you have any other questions, let me know. I'm glad to help.
Thank you. Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.